I've been thinking a lot about conflict in writing and storytelling recently. Those who have followed this channel know I'm currently researching how to properly plot and outline stories. And one thing that's keeps coming up in my research is this idea that every scene in your story should have conflict in it. And when I first read this idea, I took that to mean every scene should have the conflict. Like as Gandalf is riding his cart into Hobbiton and Frodo goes, "You're late," before Gandalf can get a word out and Nazgul swoops in like, "Where's the ring?" And I just thought, that sounds exhausting. Like how is that pacing realistic? How can you establish character and world and setting? But I realized that doesn't mean the capital P plot conflict is present in every scene, but just that some sort of conflict exists in every scene, or at the very least, every scene is either setting up the promise of or exploring the payoff of some kind of conflict. Conflict is what makes an ordinary moment into a story. Whether you're showing off a character or exploring a setting, it's conflict in those moments that makes that engaging, that makes someone want to know what happens next. And that doesn't mean the antagonist has to be there, because conflict is just any time two opposing forces meet. There's so many different ways for that to happen in our regular lives, so many different types and vectors of conflict that have potential to make regular moments into a story. And the same is true of your characters, especially if we've established what they want. If we know what our character's desire or goal is, we know what it is that they value, then there is opportunity for another force to oppose or threaten those things. And probably the most obvious kind of conflict in a story is, of course, a character versus a character, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. But even that type of conflict, character on character conflict, doesn't have to be about the villains or antagonists. If you have two allies preparing for an impending alien invasion, and one of them wants to take everyone they care about and have them hide in a bunker underground, but the other one says, "No, I want us all to stand together and meet these aliens head on." Even though they're not antagonistic towards each other, they're allies, that there's conflict in their difference of values, in their methodology. And this type of conflict lets us further characterize them and show how they think and what they prioritize in a way that's engaging and compelling, rather than just telling, this guy values family, this guy values making a stand, this and being bold. You can show that in the conflict and have it earn its place in the story. Anytime you add conflict to a regular moment, it suddenly makes it compelling. You want to know how things are going to play out. You want to know which person's philosophy is going to win, who's going to concede to who, or are they going to go their separate ways? Even though the main conflict isn't really a part of the scene, that minor character conflict carries the momentum through the story, even when they aren't actively fighting aliens. But there are so many other vectors of conflict as well. You have characters versus nature, and that might be a survival story. How is the character having to survive harsh conditions to achieve their goal? Or does a storm detour or delay them in pursuing their quest? Likewise, time might be a factor. You have conflict between a character and the passage of time. How does time oppose the character's goals? Or society? Do laws and organizations exist that obstruct the character's desire or threaten what they value? But probably the most potential here is in this approach of a character versus themselves, a character in conflict with themselves. Is a lot of people have conflicting desires. You want to be a successful business person, but you also want to lay around and read books all day. That's a point of conflict. If you want to pursue a romantic interest, but you have a fear of rejection, there's conflict there. There are countless points of conflict within a person that can add interest to your story and flesh out a character to make them more real and relatable and compelling. A tool I'm finding really useful in approaching this inner conflict is a concept I've heard called the 4 selves of a character. And it's this idea that every person has 4 versions of who they are. There's your reputed self, who the public sees you as, who they think you to be. There's your social self. That's the person you are around those close to you, like your friends and family, and who they think you to be. And then there's your inner self. That's what you think is actually true about yourself and how you consider yourself. And then your hidden self is the actual truth. It's that your real kind of repressed desire, or the thing that you're maybe not really acknowledging that's true about you. And these four versions of a person usually are not perfectly aligned. So that creates opportunity for really unique conflict. If you have a character that's reputed for being a violent warrior, but in isolation, they really just want to settle down and have a family, that's going to create points of tension in your story. A character who thinks of themselves as timid and cowardly, but deep down has a desire to be bold and achieve something great, is going to add extra layers of conflict to their story. You could base an entire story just on these types of inner conflicts, depending on the genre. But in every genre, they give you an opportunity to give your character more depth and life, and to maintain interest and momentum in your story, even in the quieter moments between the main capital P plot conflict. So my thought recently has been, how can I apply this in a brainstorming context while I'm plotting a novel? And I figure if I lay out a main premise, what's the primary conflict? I can then just run down this list, character versus character. What other people's desires or goals will come into direct conflict with the main character in this main plot? Or how might the passage of time affect them? Or how might nature become a point of resistance, a point of conflict in the story? Or are the structures of society a point of tension? Are there laws and governments at play in this story? I think this has the potential to make some otherwise really simple and kind of vanilla story ideas become much more interesting and complex when you just keep layering minor points of conflict on top of the main plot conflict. So that's what I've been thinking about. That's what I'm working on. I'd love to hear what you think. Is there a type of conflict in stories that you find really engaging, that just pulls you into a story? If you're an aspiring writer like me, I have a free character template on my Patreon. I'll link it in the video description. I just updated it today to add the 4 selves, that you now have a place to define those things as you're considering your character, so you can refer back to this and keep your characters consistent. And I just want to make a character sheet that really helps you write compelling stories instead of just wasting your time on details that will never come up in your story. So if you want to write more interesting characters, check that out. You don't even need to sign up for an email or anything. It's just totally free, because I want your feedback. I want your help to make this the best tool possible. Otherwise, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in another video.